3.3, addition and subtraction of radicals. So we'll just do this the same way we did when we were adding like terms back in Chapter 2 for expressions involving some indeterminate. And so let me do on page 418, problem number 2. In exercises 1 through 20, perform the indicated operations. 4 rad 3 minus 5 rad 3. And so I have 4 apples minus 5 apples is a negative 1 apple. And so 4 radical 3 minus 5 radical 3 is a negative radical 3. Let me do problem number 4. 3 rad 5 plus 5 rad 5. Well, 3 bananas plus 5 bananas is 8 bananas. And so 3 rad 5 plus 5 rad 5 is 8 rad 5. Let me do problem number 12. 1/2 times the square root of 10 plus 2/3 times the square root of 10 is equal to, well, let me write these as fractions. So this is 1 times rad 10 is rad 10 over 2 plus 2 times rad 10 over 3. I have a 2 and a 3. I want to find the common denominator. The least common denominator in this case is 6. 2 times 3 is 6, so let's multiply and divide by 3. 3 times 2 is 6, so let's multiply and divide by 2. So I have 3 rad 10 over 6. 2 times 2 is 4 rad 10 over 6. 3 rad 10 plus 4 rad 10 is 7 rad 10, all over the common denominator, 6. Let me do problem number 20. The cube root of negative 9 times the cube root of 72 minus 2 times the cube root of 6 times the cube root of 4. Well, in this case, it doesn't look like anything's in common yet. So let's try to simplify this and see if somehow we can make them like radicals. The cube root of, well, negative 9 times 72 is negative 648 minus 2 times the cube root of 6 times the cube root of 4. 6 times 4 is 24. Let me write negative 648 as a product of 2 terms, one of which is a perfect cube, the largest perfect cube factor. So negative 216 times 3 is negative 648. 8 times 3 is 24. The cube root of negative 216 is negative 6 times your rad 3 minus 2 times, well, the cube root of 8 is 2, rad 3. 2 times 2 is 4, so I have negative 6 rad 3 minus 4 rad 3 is a negative 10 rad 3. Any questions about that? Okay. Let me do problem number 24. In exercises 21 through 45, perform the indicated operations and simplify. Assume that the variables represent non-negative real numbers. Okay, so I have here the square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 2 times the square root of 3 plus 2 square root of 2. So notice that this is the product of the sum and difference of 2 terms. And so this should just equal the difference of the squares using our special product formula that we memorized. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. Negative 2 times positive 2 is a negative 4. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 3 minus 5 is 3 minus 8 is a negative 5. Let me do problem number 32. 3 rad A minus 2B times the quantity 5 rad A minus 4B. So let us multiply this out using the distributive property. So let's multiply. 3 times 5 is 15. The square root of A times the square root of A is A. 3 rad, well, positive times negative is negative. 3 times 4 is 12. Rad A times B is B rad A. Negative times positive is negative. 2 times 5 is 10. B times rad A is B rad A. Negative times negative is positive. 2 times 4 is 8. B times B is B squared. Now, lastly, let's combine like terms. So let's combine these terms here. And so 15A minus 12 B rad A minus 10 B rad A. Well, minus 12 minus 10 of them is a minus 22 B rad A plus your 8 B squared. So you just combine like terms in the middle. Let me do problem number 40. The cube root of p to the 4 times the cube root of q squared times the cube root of p squared minus 2 cube root of q to the 4. Okay, so we're going to have to multiply this out. So using distributive property, I have cube root of p to the 4 times the cube root of p squared, multiply radicans. I have the same base, p, so add exponents. 4 plus 2 is 6. So this is the cube root of p to the 6 minus, well, a positive times a negative is a negative. 1 times 2 is 2. The cube root of p to the 4 times the cube root of q to the 4 is the cube root of p to the 4, q to the 4. Positive times positive is positive. The cube root of q squared times the cube root of p squared is, well, the cube root of q squared, p squared, q squared. Positive times negative is negative. 1 times 2 is 2. The cube root of q squared times the cube root of q to the 4th. Well, I have the same index, cube root. I have the same base, q. So I add exponents. 2 plus 4 is 6. Lastly, we can simplify some of this. The cube root of p to the 6 is just p squared. I can write p to the 4th is p cubed times p. Q to the 4th is q to the 3rd times q. I can take the cube root of q to the 6th, q squared. The cube root of p cubed is p. The cube root of q to the 3rd is q. And so I get, for my final answer, p squared minus 2pq times the cube root of p cubed plus the cube root of p squared q squared minus 2q squared. And that's your answer. Let me do problem number 44. Multiply the quantity 2 plus rad 3x minus 4 rad y times the quantity 2 minus rad 3 plus rad y. So let's multiply this. Well, let's rearrange this so that I can use my special product formula. So notice that I can group the rad 3x minus 4 rad y. Next, I can group these last two terms But notice there's a minus outside the parentheses, so I'm going to have to change the signs. So I have a minus quantity, rad 3x. Since this is a plus, I'll have to change the plus to a minus for rad y. And now notice the way I've written this. This is now the product of the sum and difference of the same two terms. And so their product is just the difference of their squares. And so 2 times 2 is 4. Positive times negative is negative. Rad 3x minus rad 4y, quantity squared. Well, again, I know the special product formula. So I have 4 minus, so let's square this whole quantity. And so by the special product formula, this is just equal to the square root of 3x quantity squared. The square gets rid of the square root, so it's just 3x. I have rad 3x minus 4 rad y times 2. Well, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. I can multiply the radicands together, so radical 3xy plus 4 squared is 16. The square gets rid of the square root, y. Now let's change all the signs inside the parentheses. This negative changes this positive 3x to a negative 3x. This negative changes the negative 8 rad 3xy to a positive 8 rad 3xy. This negative changes the positive to a negative 16y. And so, once I multiply this, I get 4 minus 3x plus 8 rad 3xy minus 16y. And that's your answer. Any questions on section 10.4? Okay. Let me go to section 10.4.